Time we'd like to welcome our second honoree as part of the Distinguished Young Alumni Program. So basically, this is a program in its third year that Student Alumni Board is a big part of putting on, and I'll let Adam talk a little bit about what exactly Student Alumni Board has done to kind of get DYA off in its feet the past 3 years.
For sure. Student Alumni Board is a program through the Alumni Association, helping connect the Alumni Association and current students. And one of our big, a few years ago we realized one of our big areas of lacking was the young alumni. I know personally that I connect a lot better to Corey and Matt because they're so much closer to my age than bringing back a graduate from the 70s or the 60s. So just being able to connect with somebody like that was really important to us. So over the last 8 months, we have been bringing, SAB has been working diligently to put together a program. Matt and Corey have had incredibly busy days in the last, today and then as well tomorrow, interacting with students. So now we're excited to welcome them here to give a keynote kind of about whatever they want to, about their career development and how they got from K-State and how K-State developed them and got them to where they are now.
So now I have the honor of welcoming our second Distinguished Young Alumni Award recipient of the evening, Matt King. A native of Wichita, Kansas, he's currently working as a fund analyst for the World Bank Group, an international development institution in Washington, D.C. that provides finance and technical assistance to developing countries. In particular, he helps manage two funds capitalized at around $283 million that support energy access, renewable energy, and energy efficiency projects. While at K-State, he was the co-founder of the nationally recognized K-State Proud campaign and president of Student Alumni Board, among many other roles. A member of Phi Beta Kappa, he graduated summa cum laude from K-State in 2007 with a degree in political science, natural resources, and environmental sciences before continuing his education as a Fulbright scholar at Oxford University, where he earned a master's degree in environmental change and management. Let's all join together in welcoming Matt King.
You hear me? There we go. Now we're connected. First of all, cats. All right, last night, big win. I'm totally chalking this up to the fact that Corey and I were the fans of the game, and I haven't been back to a game in like 5 years, so I'm going to make sure we rearrange our travel plans so that we can come to the game on Saturday against Iowa State. But I wanted to start off by saying thank you, a very, very strong, heartfelt thank you to Student Alumni Board and the Alumni Association, because they're both organizations that are very near and dear to my heart, and so it makes it particularly honoring and humbling that they would think about me for this award. I also want to thank Kanan and Adam for the really flattering introduction. There's no factual errors in there, so I will say this: yes, I went to Oxford, and I did win a Fulbright scholarship, and I got to travel the world. And you didn't hear about it, but I'll talk about it later tonight. I've started a few businesses, and I work at the World Bank, and that's all well and good. But right now, I want to talk about what the World Bank Group is. So it was kind of a mouthful earlier. It's a multilateral development bank. It's not like a private, commercial, or institutional bank. Our shareholders are governments, and they channel funding through us to the poorest countries in the world to try to eradicate extreme poverty. And I am fortunate enough to work on two funds. They're capitalized about $300 million, where we invest in renewable energy projects. And so what does that mean? There's billions of people out there in the world right now that have no access to electricity, and they're cooking on open fires in their own homes. So what we try to do is bring to them clean cook stoves, biogas digesters, solar panels, so that they can have light, they can have clean cooking solutions, and that will help bring them out of this abject poverty. So I do also want to say thank you to Corey, because he's the one that does the real work in development. I'm just the Yahoo that sits in front of the computer in DC, and my job essentially is to tell people like Corey why he can't have the money that he needs to do his job. That's only half of a joke, so thank you, Corey. So like I said, that's all well and good. I had a great time at Oxford. I really, really, really love my job. I love getting up every day and going to the World Bank. I have fantastic coworkers. And I suppose that distinguishes me in a certain kind of way. But I've been telling everybody all week. I told Amy when she called me back in October that they got the wrong guy. And in fact, the only thing that really distinguishes me is that I am a failure. And there's no joke about that. And it's obvious, I'm not like a total and complete and abject failure, but I have completely, totally, and abjectly failed more times than I am able to count in my life. And I know that this is a total cliche, so I want to bring it back down to earth and talk about, and temper it with two things. So number one is, these are all relative failures. At the end of the day, there are folks out there who are going through real hardships every day. And throughout all of the things I'm going to talk about tonight, I've always had food in my belly, I've always had a roof over my head, I've always been healthy, and my loved ones have always been healthy. So please don't get it wrong, I've always understood those are things that I've kept in perspective. And the second thing is that failure is all relative. Or I've already said that. But the other thing that I want to talk about is that it's not like I have a rags to riches story. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, I started in abject poverty like the people that I help in Africa. My family was really loving. My parents both worked very, very hard. We weren't super well off, but we never wanted for anything. And they always sacrificed and worked very hard to give us that kind of a loving environment. So thank you guys. This is not about me. This is about you guys. This is about my family. So thank you. I think that everyone has these relative failures, so what I want to do is talk about the failures that I've experienced. I want to talk about the lessons that I learned through those failures, and then how they link to all these great successes that Adam and Kanan were so nice to talk about earlier. And I want to start by telling a story, and that is how I came up with some lifelong goals and what I wanted to do with my career. And I, from a young age, always really wanted to get into politics. It was always a conversation at the dinner table. My mom was very active and involved in the community. But when I was about 12 or 13, it was the late 90s, she ran for city council, and I was all about that. I was at the dining room table, I was throwing stamps on envelopes, I was putting labels on envelopes, I was putting signs in front yards. I was 12 or 13 years old, and I was walking around our neighborhood, knocking on doors, handing out flyers, and telling everybody about how great my mom was. So basically like every 12 or 13-year-old around. But there was even one day where I knocked on a door, and it was one of our neighbors a couple blocks away, and she had some rather unnice things to say about my mother. And that was a whole other story I won't get into now, but I still maintain that I wanted to do politics, right? We do like to call it, there's a nice word for it, and it's public service, so I might use those a little bit interchangeably. You'll have to forgive me on that. So I had this plan from a young age. I volunteered in campaigns. I was going to go get into public service after I graduated college, and I was going to go to law school, and Oxford was part of the plan, and I had it all, this grand vision for how my life was going to work out. So when I got to K-State, of course I started being active on campus. I was in student government. I volunteered in student alumni board. I was in some of the honor societies, did the community service. I joined the fraternity. I'd like to thank the betas for all coming out so that this place isn't entirely empty. But all of those things that I had done at the beginning were to get me to the end of being student body president. Student body president here at K-State was the end. That was the goal. That was the launching pad for this grand career in politics and public service, right? I've been planning this for years. And it's important to note now that somewhere along the lines I did realize that it wasn't about just student body president, and the emphasis shift, and I realized that I really loved what I was doing. I really loved giving back to the campus and the community, but for now just know that student body president was that launching pad. So by the time I got to campus and I got to my junior year, 2006, I launched this campaign. This is our logo. It was King Beasler, and I ran for student body vice president with my best friend at the time. Her name's Emily Beasler. Her name's now Emily Scott. And we had been plotting for 4 years about how we were going to win this election, and this was going to launch my career in public service. I found out yesterday that these elections are no longer competitive, really. That is not the case when I was here. There were 9 pairs in my primary election. It was a very hard-fought race. It went on for weeks and months. I was not sleeping much. It must have been 3 to 4 hours a night. We were going to class, talking to student organizations. We were up all night chalking. We'd go to Bob's Diner, have breakfast, sleep for 2 or 3 hours, go back and do it all over again, taking a full course load and getting things done. And this went on for weeks and months. Now, I want to say, we had been organized for so long that we were pretty much considered a juggernaut. We were perceived as being unbeatable, and it was ours to lose. We had outraised and outspent our opponents tremendously. We had these shirts, these blue shirts with white lettering. It was because blue and white were the most winningest campaign colors of all time. So we had it all worked out, this whole strategy, where our signs are everywhere. We have our shirts on the right people. All the right organizations are involved, and we've got the whole campus covered. Everywhere you go, it's King Beasler, King Beasler, King Beasler. The Collegian assigns its best reporter to us. We are literally unbeatable. I feel like the sense on campus was that we were doing all the right things. We get to the primary. There's 9 pairs that we're running against. Heck, Budweiser sponsored my campaign. We went to these bar nights where we had the Budweiser reps who would conveniently be there to buy beers for people that we kind of pointed out and said, go buy a beer for that guy. By the way, Matt King running for student body president. So we get up to the primary. We win the primary election. And the people who we ran against that didn't win the primary election, or some of them, endorsed us and told their supporters to vote for us. So we go into this last week of this ridiculous campaigning, and we get to the general election, and we think we're going to win this thing. We had rented out the back of the bar that's now Tanner's. We called it Pat's. And Emily and I walk in. Our families have come in from Wichita and from Colorado, and it's shoulder to shoulder. You can't move. There's blue shirts everywhere. These people it's the sound, the energy is so loud. I mean, we can't even hear ourselves talk. We get in, everybody goes crazy, everybody goes nuts. We have to stand in a booth just to sit there and wait to hear the results of the election coming in. And as this time wears on, and we know that the polls have closed, and the radio station is getting ready to announce the results, we're standing up. This energy, this roar, it's kind of like building up in this tempo. You can just feel it. All these like 80, 90 people have been up with us all night for weeks and for months at a time. We're getting ready to release this energy. We're so excited. We're going to celebrate a victory. And the radio announcer gets on. The results of the student body presidential election for 2005-2006 are Lucas Maddie and Katie Maddie. Dead silence. So as you can imagine, I've been planning this for my entire life, right? This is it. Student body president. It's going to get me to my whole career, my whole life. And all these people are looking up at me and no one's saying a word. And I'm supposed to say something. And I have all these thoughts rushing through my head. What am I going to say? What am I going to do? Emily's not saying anything. She's standing right next to me. She's not helping me out. So we'll just chalk that one up to a giant fail. Straight off the bat. So I'll get back to that story in a bit, but we're going to move on to something else because I had to move on very quickly. Part of this plan that I had put together to get into public service was to apply for and win this prestigious national scholarship called the Truman Scholarship. And it is a lot of money, and it pays for undergraduates to go to get a graduate degree and then therefore launch this prestigious career in public service. And it's not as easy as just filling out an application and hoping you get it. From the minute I stepped foot on this campus, I worked with Jim Hohenberry in our College of Arts and Sciences to figure out what I wanted to do. What were the things that I was doing on campus? How were those going to lead to a career in public service? And when you fill out these applications, you go through literally hundreds of revisions. You move a comma, you take out the comma, you put the comma back in. Does it change the cadence of how the reader is going to read this application, this 500-word short essay, and how does it affect the message that you're going to get? So this was an extensive process, and I'm doing this while I'm running for student body president, and I get to be a finalist nationally. And so then I get into all the interview prep, right? So then it's sitting down and doing interview questions. What are they going to ask me? Every single potential question that you can think of that they're going to ask you. you go through that and you drill it into your head. And they tell me, Jim and everybody else who was helping in the process say, you know, for 18, 19, 20-year-old, this interview is really hard. And the best people in the country are finalists who win this award, and it's been known to make people cry. And I think, well, there's no way that's going to happen to me. I'm not going to cry. It's just an interview. Come on, are you kidding me? I'm not going to cry at this thing. So I lose the student body presidential election on Wednesday, and on Thursday, I am in the car to drive to Kansas City for my national finalist interview for the Truman Scholarship. And I have a fever, my nose is running. It's like my body has given up after this giant release on Wednesday night. I have the chills. It's not like a little cold. I am sick. So I get into this interview room of these distinguished panelists, and the first question is a question that we have not drilled. We have not gone into this. I don't know the answer. Instead of thinking about the answer, I'm thinking about how I didn't drill it in the interview questions. And I totally botched the question, and then all I can think about is, I'm about to cry. And then all I can think about is how angry I am that I'm about to cry. So as you can imagine, the rest of the interview did not go very well, and I did not win the Truman Scholarship. So we're going to track that up to a giant other fail, which there's supposed to be a thing that comes up there. This was supposed to be very carefully sequenced. Well, there will be a giant red fail that resembles a red stamp that goes over the front of the Truman Scholarship logo. Next up is 2 logos for the Rhodes and the Marshall Scholarships. It's a similar kind of drill, right? You don't just submit applications for these things. You go through, so you can go ahead and click it twice more. One more time, perfect, just like that. It's the same kind of drill. We're moving commas. We're taking commas out. We're putting the commas back in. It goes on for months and months at a time. Oxford and a master's degree in environmental service, which is what I wanted to focus on at the time, was part of the giant scheme on public service, right? And this was the way to get there. And if I had gotten into a place like Oxford, you know, like I said, we never wanted for anything, but we didn't have the money. I didn't have the money to go to Oxford. And getting there via these kinds of scholarships was a really big deal. And didn't even make the finalist list for either of those. So as you can see, there's a lot of really big fails, these 4 anyway, right within 6 to 9 months. So you already know from my bio, we're going to jump ahead a little bit. I did go to Oxford, I did get a Fulbright, and I'll get back to those things in a second. But when I left Oxford, one of the things that I got into, it's one of the things I do now, just focus on how do you finance renewable energy in the developing world. And what I had developed an expertise in while I was at K-State and while I was at Oxford is this thing called carbon credits. And it's super complex. We're not going to spend time going into it, but suffice it to say, this was a big market at the time. This is like 2007, 2008. And I've got a relatively large amount of experience doing it. So I started my own company. And I have 5 or 6 or 7 projects. Each of these credits is worth like 20 euros. The projections are that these credits are going to go up to like 40, 50, 100 euros depending on the projection you look at, right? So I'm burning the candle at both ends. I'm burning the midnight oil. I'm burning everything. I'm putting in the hours. I'm working hard. It's intense. And I get 5 to 7 projects. The lead time on these projects is pretty extensive. So as I'm developing these projects, there's a natural gas plant in Pakistan. There's an efficient lighting project in Kenya. There's a cement project in Vietnam. I'm working 2 other jobs to pay the bills because I'm self-financing this company. I'm offering services. I'm not selling a technology. I'm really killing myself for this stuff. And then 2009, the economy crashes. Carbon market's okay for a while, but what happens when the economy crashes, right? People spend less money on fuel. They go on fewer trips. They fly less. They use less electricity. And after a bit of time, emissions decrease. And as emissions decrease after a bit of time, there's no demand for carbon credits. So the price absolutely collapses. So what you have is recession, energy use decreases, emissions decrease, carbon market collapses, and Matt's business absolutely disappears. So we've got to fail there as well. Luckily, about this time, a wealthy guy who was actually my mentor at the time calls me up and says, Matt, I've got this great idea. I want to get into renewable energy in Kansas. What are you doing? I said, well, actually, since you mention it, I know of a company that is making a really great technology. It's based here in the UK, and they're looking for people to sell it in America. And that technology is called, click the button, active energy. So I pack up from England and I move all the way back to Kansas City and I start this company. We create a business plan, he invests in it, and things are going great. We've got national sales accounts. I've got DOD, Department of Defense is interested in looking at how do they put this energy efficiency technology into the hundreds of thousands of buildings that they own. They sell for like $25,000, $30,000 a pop. That's a lot of money. Again, there's a lot of midnight oil going on, getting burned here. There's candles getting burned at both ends. A lot of work's getting put into it. And one day he calls me into his office in Topeka. I drive down the road, and he says, Matt, you know what? I'm sorry, but I'm taking a job in Washington, D.C., and I'm divesting completely from Kansas. I was ahead of schedule and under budget. And because this guy was a mentor at the time, this felt like a really big betrayal. So we're going to chalk that up to another giant fail. Right there. I had been dating a girl for a couple years. She was living in Europe, and we broke up about the same time. Actually, like pretty much actually the same week. So things weren't going so well for me. The day after this happened, I packed up and I moved back home in with my mom. So a couple years go by, and there's a couple other fails, but we're going to go to the next one. I get a buddy calls me up and says, Matt, I want to start a solar company. I've been selling solar for a long, long time, and I've got a team of 5 people together, and I want to move to San Antonio, Texas, and start this company. So we put together a business plan, and we go out and secure some investment, and I pick up and move to San Antonio, Texas. We had the right team of people, and we were in the right market at the right time, and I'm burning midnight oil and burning candles at both ends. And after a while, things didn't work out, and I actually ended up having to leave that company. It wasn't too bright of a situation. So we've got another company that I've started, and I've really worked my tail off on. That didn't work out. So we've got to fail. So we've got a lot of fail up here, right? And there's a lot of small things that I haven't really talked about that were also really consequential. And I won't get into detail. There was a couple of these devastating heartbreaks. There's a lot of these smaller business failures that went on, and all along the way, I knew what I wanted to do by that time. I knew what kind of job I wanted to have. So there were, tens, scores, dozens of interviews and networking events. I moved to DC for a while and talked to people and networked and tried to find what that next opportunity was for me, and really slogged through what I call the wilderness. I was out in the wilderness for a while, and I would attribute that to what caused me to lose my hair. So that was me when I was 18, as a freshman at K-State. I had a lot of hair. It was all the way down to my shoulders. It curled up really nice and beautifully. It was brilliant. And as you can see, I don't have any of that left. And I was going to apologize to Corey for making a joke about him, but he already beat me to it, so now I apologize to you for making the same bald joke, because good things do come out of bad situations, because apparently it is the minimum requirement to be the Distinguished Young Alumni. So I did tell you how my failures and the lessons learned would lead to the successes. So now I save $20 a month on haircuts, and I get to talk to you guys for 30 or 45 minutes. So we'll get Corey off of there for a while. And so now we'll start talking about what are the lessons that I learned here, right? So I want to take you back to that bar. Take you back to the back of Tanner's and Pat's. And we've got this crescendo of energy that's building over weeks and months. We're sleeping 3 to 4 hours a day, and it's all building up to this one moment where we're packed into this back room, shoulder to shoulder. All of our supporters, people have been up with us all night, chalking and eating at Bob's Diner before they didn't allow smoking in there. And all building up to this moment where we're here, the winners of the student body presidential election are Lucas Maddie and Katie Maddie, and the place goes dead silent. And I'm having an existential crisis in my head. No one's saying a word. No one's even breathing. No one's coughing. And I'm thinking, the only thing I think this is normal. I think it's human. Say that I am going, forget the student body. I've worked my tail off for 3 or 4 years. I've given a lot back. I've done all the right things. I've volunteered. I was in student government. I ran a textbook campaign. We were going to win. What's going on here? And I'm going to retreat. I'm not going to stick around. I'm not going to keep working. And a dear friend of mine, his name's Chance Lee. Chance Lee, he's still a teacher here. I don't even think we've ever talked about this. He says, woohoo, Matt and Emily, and he claps, and this pent-up energy, we were going to be celebrating this victory, the whole place erupts. I can't even describe to you how loud it got, and I look out in front of this crowd, and all those negative thoughts that I was thinking about, I was going to quit, I was going to run away, I was going to walk away, absolutely vanished. 8 years later, I'm getting goosebumps, and I'm getting chills up my spine. It is still emotional for me to talk about. It is the most electrifying thing I've ever experienced in my entire life. And Emily and I looked at each other, and we knew we were going to stick around. And this is more impactful for me now because I've gone through all that. And this is where it started. But looking out and realizing that all those people had been with me and with Emily on that journey, that the end wasn't running for student body president. Student body president was the means to the end. And the end was the public service. The end was giving back to this campus and to the students and to my family here at K-State. And I knew I was going to stick around. That energy buoyed me through the rest of the semester and through the rest of the summer. We come back in the fall, and Emily says to me, I've got this crazy idea. So she pitches it to me. We sit down and hash it out because I'm in, hook, line, and sinker. I love her idea. So we sit down and we put it together, we develop it a bit further, and we pitch it to Mindy Wexelman and the foundation. And she buys it hook, line, and sinker. And we hash it out a bit more, and we get more and more people involved, and K-State Proud is born. Another thing that I got to do when I was at K-State was I got to be president of Student Alumni Board. And I'll tell you, of all the stuff that I've done in my whole life, all these good things that Adam and Kanan talked about, those two things still remain the coolest things that I've ever done. And they're the coolest things that I definitely did here at K-State. And it was born out of that, all of that hard work and the years and efforts of planning and all the midnight candle burning and all everything that went on for years and years and years. So, what's the message there? I mean, one thing is, what is K-State Proud? This is in its 9th year. I feel really old about this. It's in its 9th year. We've raised almost $900,000 for students who are at risk of dropping out of university. I mean, that's pretty impactful, what we did there, right? And it all started out of the failure. So what's the lesson that we learned there, right? I'd like to chalk it up to one thing. It's passion plus love plus trust equals opportunities. So what do I mean by that, right? I mean, find your passion. For me, I already told you, the end wasn't student body president. The passion was the public service, and the student body president and the student government and the student alumni board. That was the means to get to the end. That was the end. And so find your passion. Find what you really care about. What do I mean by love? I mean, go out there and you have to do it every day. You have to practice that passion every day. You have to get up every day and really love to do that passion. And you surround yourself with people that you love, which dovetails into trust. And trust is in two ways. Number one is you got to trust that process, that if you do what you're passionate about and that what you love, that opportunities will be created along the way, even if they're not on your time frame or they're not the opportunities that you expected or that you wanted. And then secondly, you got to trust the people that you love, people like Chance and people like my family, because you have to have the support of those people, my brothers at Beta, to give you the space to take the big risks, to go after your dreams and risk the failures, even if those failures are monumental to help get you through there. So I want to talk really quickly and move on to the next item, which is I want to talk about door handles. And I'm not exaggerating here. I interned one summer for an environmental nonprofit, and I traveled around the state of Kansas, and I tried to get these nonprofit, or what I do, okay, let me take a step back. I drove around the state of Kansas and talked to the Kansas Farm Bureau county boards of directors. Now, I'm from Wichita. I have a lot of respect and appreciation for our agricultural community, but that's a life and a culture that I didn't understand fully at the time. And so when I drove around these Kansas County Farm Bureau boards of directors, drove around in my 97 Chevy Blazer in the middle of summer wearing a suit to talk about carbon credits and climate change and global warming, and the air conditioning was broken in that car. So I drove around with the windows down. And I've been trying for weeks and months to get these meetings with a couple of these boards of directors, a couple hours away. And I finally get both of these meetings on the same day. So I head out from Wichita. I'm heading down the highway towards Emporia, and I kid you not, I'm probably singing some Keith Urban or something. Wearing this suit, I'm sweating, it's hot, and the door on this car, I'm not exaggerating, falls off. I mean, it doesn't fall off, okay, but the door opens up. I mean, it swings out, and I'm driving down the highway, and I put my arm out, and I'm like, oh my God, what's going to happen here? I'm swerving a little bit. So I have to drive the rest of the way to Emporia. I have to decide, do I turn around and go back to Wichita, or do I continue on to Emporia so I can make this meeting? So I drive to the rest of the way to Emporia with my arm out the window of this car, holding it shut, sweating. It's 100 degrees, because I want to go to this meeting that I've tried to get on the books for weeks and for months. So I get to the Chevy dealership in Emporia, and the guy comes out, and he's like, I have good news and bad news. The good news is we fixed your car. The bad news is we had to wire the door shut. So you have to get in through the window of the driver's side or get in through the passenger door on the other side. So I'm like, well, it doesn't matter. I have to get in and drive to this next meeting. So I get to this next meeting, and luckily, they're waiting outside of the office in the parking lot right in front of me. So I have to reach out and pull myself out of this blazer in 90, 100-degree heat. I'm sweating. I'm wearing this suit. They're first of all thinking, what is this guy doing in June wearing a suit? But it was a good, productive meeting. And of course, afterwards, I had to get back into the blazer, climbing into the driver's side window, and I drive to the next meeting. And I think, well, the driver's side window didn't work, so I got to try the passenger side door. So I climb over this giant console in the middle of this SUV, and I get out the passenger side door, and I realize that luckily, these folks are standing inside of a glass office building, and they're all watching me do this. So second of all, I'm making two great first impressions that are clearly setting me up well with these meetings where I'm going to talk about global warming with farmers. But what's the message there, right? And I would chalk that up to, or what's the message there? And I would say that you have to be willing to take the small steps. I wrote about that experience in the Truman, the Marshall, and the Rhodes Scholarship applications. They didn't work out. But I also wrote about it in the Fulbright application. And I ended up going to Oxford on a Fulbright. And both of those applications or acceptances came in the same week. So when I talk about door handles, what I really mean is that door handles represent small steps. So moving the comma on that story, removing the comma, deleting it, putting it back in, continuing with that process that took weeks and months to hone not only that story, led me to the Fulbright and to get to Oxford, which was a truly life-changing event. Not only that, but it's representative of the fact that it's one thing to dream really big and to go after your passion, to love what you do and to trust people and to take big risks. Like, it's sexy to talk about that. But what you don't talk about is all the small things, the thousands of small steps that you have to do to get to the things that you really wanted. So when it comes time to it, to really get out there and focus on your passion and do what you love, you got to focus on the door handles and focus on what's in front of you and what you can control to get to the end of the line and to what to these successes. So yeah, I work at the World Bank now, and so I learned a lot from these businesses and these failures. I wasn't particularly successful. I made a little bit of money, but I didn't make a whole lot. But what are the things that I learned that got me to a place like the World Bank Group? The World Bank is a large institution where consensus rules, and communication and being able to work as a part of a team is an absolute must. So what are the things that that I learned from these failures that got me to where I am today in the World Bank? And I would say that there's really four things. Listen, create, share, and thank. I forgot that I was going to talk about Banana Republic and Dodge. So along the way, in this wilderness that I was telling you about, there was a significant amount of time where I worked at Banana Republic selling clothes, and I worked at a Dodge dealership selling oil changes. And it's not sexy, it's not exciting, but I learned about teamwork in these things from Blue Spark Carbon, from Active Energy to 180 Solar, from Banana Republic and Dodge dealership, to how to work as a part of a team and how to be successful, and essentially what I'm doing, where I'm managing $300 million at the World Bank Group. So there's four things here. I would say listen first and talk second. Secondly, I would say create. It's not enough to just point out the things that go wrong, but and not just to identify a problem, but to come with a solution as well. Share. I would say share in your successes and own your failures and keep your commitments. It's something that I learned from those failures. And thank. Thank the people that helped got you there, the people that you love and the people that you trust as you're pursuing your passion. And then finally, I want to say the lesson I learned from all of these failures is that you need to keep your hair. I wasn't so successful on that as we talked about, but what do I mean by that? I mean, embrace failure. Don't be afraid of it. Don't run away from it. Like, when it happens, take a deep breath and look at it and assess it and learn from it. How are you going to grow as a person? How are you going to translate the things that didn't work out on your timeline or the things that didn't work out into successes, whether or not it's your Fulbright or your Oxford or your World Bank or your Distinguished Young Alumni? So, I've talked for a long time, guys. I'm even running out of speed. I think that if I could summarize it in one way, these are the 4 things that I want you to take away. Find what you're passionate about. Do it every day. Practice that passion. Do it with love. Find the people that you love and trust and surround yourself with them. And those opportunities will come. They should come. But they don't always come. And so when they don't come, you need to realize that it's not enough to just say, oh, I'm going to follow my dreams. I'm going to work with passion and love. But you got to put in the small steps. You got to focus on the door handles. When things are so overwhelming that you can't continue, you can't go on, you got to focus on the little things, the small steps that are right in front of you, and take it one step at a time. Keep moving forward because you'll get to those opportunities eventually. Listen, create, share, and think. And thank. Listen first and talk second. It's infinitely easier to criticize than to create. So build something. Don't just destroy everything. Share in your successes and own your failures. And thank the people around you. Earn their loyalty and keep their loyalty and be loyal. And keep your hair. Don't stress about it when bad things go, when bad things happen and things don't go your way. So the biggest message here is fail. First and foremost, I do want you to fail. That's my overall message tonight. Take risks. Get outside your comfort zone. Go to countries where no one speaks a lick of English. And I want you to fall flat on your face a whole lot, and I want it to hurt. But when I say that I want you to fail, what I really mean is that I want you to do what you love to do. I want you to love and trust others. I want you to find your passion, to work so hard at it that your hands bleed. My favorite author, Camus, said, to live to the point of tears, to fully engage with your fellow human beings in this like crazy, messed up thing that we call life, this everyday journey that we take together. Because it's really rare that you find people that are successful in everything that they do. And so in order to set yourself up for a lifetime of successes, and to really be successful where it matters the most, you need to fail. You need to fail spectacularly and often. So, thank you very much. That went on kind of long, guys. I tell you what, I ran out of steam there at the end, so I apologize if I rambled a bit. I covered a lot, so it's okay. I understand. Yeah.
So you mentioned Student Alumni Board and K-State Proud were kind of the 2 capacities where you learned the most or you had the most fun. Can you give us maybe an experience in either of those that you can share with us that made it so spectacular?
I don't think that K-State Proud really fully hit home for me until, to be honest, a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. I think that one of the cool things about K-State Proud was we were just so focused on getting the money. We knew that there was this need to help students financially, and we were so focused on setting it up this first year that it was such a crazy period that we knew that we wanted to set it up for the long term. But that wasn't really a focus of ours. So one of the coolest things is that students after Emily and I and Student Foundation and our first co-chairs, Jenna and Joe, was that they took it and ran with it, and you guys have made it into this like tremendous thing that is ingrained in the culture of K-State. And that didn't really hit home with me, the impact of what that meant to people or this campus, until a couple years ago. There was a video where some of the Student Opportunity Award winners talked about what it meant for them to get money. And we tried to set up the process for how you give those awards out and how you help these students that need it the most to stay in school. But that was incredibly impactful. So it wasn't even here while I was at K-State, and it wasn't even something that I did. It was what all of you had done. So I would say that the lasting, that legacy that we started that has continued to this day is I think that's the thing that sticks with me the most. And the fact that you guys have grown Student Alumni Board into not just an organization that helps with recruitment, but it fits into this time frame of how do we interact with people who are lifelong K-Staters from the moment that they're born into a family of parents that have gone to K-State, and they go to K-State football games, and then we do some recruitment when they're in middle school and high school, and then they come to campus, and then they graduate, and they're poor, young, broke alumni like me until they become, well off, and they want to give back to the university. And so Student Alumni Board is a really big part of that. So something like Distinguished Young Alumni Award is something cool because, again, it's an outgrowth of the things that I worked on. And so to see how you guys have taken these things that I was involved with and ran with them and made them into something that I didn't even think about, we didn't think about, we didn't talk about this stuff, is pretty cool. Yeah.
So you kind of mentioned that you knew exactly what kind of job you wanted to have. You were just kind of looking for that right niche. Well, the world of environmentalism and kind of this carbon tax, that's kind of a broad area. How did you manage to narrow down the exact niche that you wanted to get into?
Yeah, well, to be honest, it's climate change, right? It's global warming, and we're from Kansas, and we have a culture that's very good at asking the right questions and rightly so being tough on these big grand ideas like carbon credits and cap and trade. And so when I got interested in how do you fund renewable energy all over the world, there's several ways you can do that. You can, or how do you support renewable energy? And this is one of the things I studied at Oxford via my degree, where I focused on economics, and it's what is the best economically from a purely academic sense is not always what is possible politically. And so my background in politics and public service kind of led me to this idea that carbon credits was something that embraced free markets and private enterprise, and was a way to also combat climate change, put a price on carbon, bring this pollution, put a price on it and bring it back into the economy. So it kind of hit on all of these things where there's like this giant Venn diagram where I felt it was like a sweet spot. It was an area where I could help in climate change and environmental issues, but it was a politically feasible, I thought it was a politically feasible policy that we could actually get through in the US and in Europe. And so it was born out of this need to just really wanting to solve problems. And I felt like there was a good way that we could have done that.
All right, we have time for one more question if anyone has one.
Mindy.
Thank you, as always, you're amazing. But look ahead maybe 25, 30 years, where will we see Matt? What will you be doing? Not maybe 3, 4, 5 years, but maybe 20, 25 years down the road? Where do you see yourself?
I don't have an answer to that question. I don't have an answer to that question because it's tough, right? I mean, I love what I'm doing now, and I like the World Bank. I feel like I make an impact. My coworkers are brilliant. I get to travel. I like living in Washington, D.C., and so I could see myself doing that. But I think it's important for me. I have some stability now, but I think it's important. It will be important for me to go out and take some more risks and to try some more things. I don't really feel like I'm in the right place to do that. I've had a lot of, you saw it, I had a lot of failures and I've fallen a lot short, and I'm doing some cool things now. But I think I'd like to take those risks again, and even if it means more failure, maybe start some more businesses if the opportunities are right, continue to follow my passion, which is this confluence of policy and energy and development and bringing people out of poverty. So I don't know where I'm going to be, and I I don't think anybody should feel like they need to have an answer to that question. But it's still a really good one. You should ask yourself that every single day.
All right, let's give Matt one more hand for sharing his incredible story.
It was a marathon.